Going on Twitch. We are back from our break, and we are talking about what's going on. We've got a difficult conversation coming up because we want to talk about mostly the toxicity in our city. No, we're really here to talk about toxicity in the gaming community and communities in general. I'll start this off here. Anyone who's been in a Call of Duty chat room for more than a few hours knows that the gaming community has a lot of problems with toxic players. Misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, racism. It's a huge issue in competitive gaming communities on every platform. And we wanted to take some time to talk about toxicity in online gaming, why it's so pervasive, and healthy ways to address it. So I've got a couple of questions for you guys, and I wanted to hear your answers. First one, what are some examples of toxicities that you've seen in gaming communities, particularly stuff related to misogyny, homophobia, and racism?
I can go ahead and start. I'll take
it. Robin, you go first.
Snatch it up. So yeah, a lot of misogyny I've experienced in gaming communities, just either people saying, just tearing you apart for if you make one little mistake in a game, like, oh, you're a girl, you can't game, like that sort of mean nastiness, or just any of your accomplishments just not meaning much, and being really sexualized and to the point where you leave those communities. Like, I haven't been able to stay online gaming for very long because I just get fed up with it. I'm like, okay, I get it. I'm a girl. Yeah, you want to say these things about me? Fine. But I don't have to listen. I'm going to turn my headset off. That kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Jake, you?
Yeah, like, I mean, I've been playing games since I was a kid, especially online. Mm-hmm. Like, that was one of the first things I remember hooking up, like the old Xbox, like the original, and playing, just some Halo 2, those big, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later, especially on the Halo 2 front. But like, yeah, I've experienced not as much misogyny, except for the few times that I've allowed like Jessica or like my girlfriend or somebody like that to put on the headset, because as soon as you let a girl talk, oh my god, like it comes out. But like definitely, I remember as far as like racism in the old Halo 2 ones, you would sometimes get like a French or like somebody else that was from another country on the server. And as soon as they found out you were American, like, you couldn't understand what they were saying, but dude, they were talking mad noise. And so like, definitely like, that's been the biggest one is in playing sports games as well. I nothing with homophobia or misogyny or racism, but definitely some like stuff like I
experienced a lot of homophobia in a lot of different gaming communities.
Oh yeah, as far as like,
I would be more than willing to drop an F word here or there, or anytime I mean, like any type of thing that made you sound emasculine or anything like that, they would automatically label you as whatever gender they would assume that would be. And I felt like that is something, when you're experiencing that as a kid, those are the kind of things that keep you in the closet. When you hear those things as pervasive online and in chat rooms and then with other people that are your age and how they look at things. Yeah, I've seen it in tons of different places.
Oh yeah, like it's especially within online gaming. That's one of the biggest things. And the bigger the community, that's one, I think what it really comes down to though, is like the larger the community, the more of a chance there is to bring out some of these like more toxic elements that you see. That doesn't mean that there aren't niche communities that don't have some toxic elements, but if there's one thing that I noticed, on a list of like trying to like, when I was trying to like come up with or think of like this week's topics of like, what are some of the most toxic communities, it's like it really came down to, wow, these are huge communities, and so, and I think there's something to that, is like the more people there are, the more opportunity there is to have like shitty people.
So why do you think in regards to that, why do you think this behavior? I mean, there are plenty of other places where there are large there are large gatherings of people. Why do you think that behavior is more prevalent here than some of those other ones? Or do you think that it's not? It's just as prevalent as it would be anywhere else. If anywhere else you're going to have a mic and a chat room, you're going to have that same level of toxicity? Or do you think it's more so in communities, particularly in video game communities, like some of the toxic communities that we're going to be talking about later?
Well, I think that has to do with you being anonymous, first of all. So you have this air of like anonymity, but then on top of that, you're doing something competitive. So you are both able to hide your identity and you're competing with somebody. So you have this sense of, okay, well, I'm going to tear them down. I'm going to say whatever I want to because they are my enemy, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and they don't know who I am, and I can just pull out all the stops. So I think that has to do with part of it. I don't know. What do you think, Jake?
Yeah, no, I was 100% agree. Like, it's just, they don't have to see this person face to face. Like, there's something weird about like my generation and myself in particular is like, I've always considered my online persona to be me. And so I've always had photos of myself. I've always had like, like I've never had a troll account, if you will, like where it's just some anime photos and I just yell.
I troll from my main account,
Yeah, if I'm trolling, it's Jake trolling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is me trolling you, not a troll account. It is God's insight that thinks that your opinion is dog shit.
Exactly, bro. And so it's one of those where like I've never like used any type of like fake online thing. And so like even in video games, I've used like my own name or my stream name or my Twitter handle or like something that was always associated back to me. And so like I've never even felt like anonymous online in a way. And so like I don't understand it. When I'm talking shit, I keep it, I'm talking shit. That's coming from me. But like it's I think it gets worse and worse whenever it is the anonymity, whenever they can kind of like say whatever they want to say and they feel like there's no consequences. But then like Bronwyn said, it's also competitive, which already brings out, it brings out a different side in most people. Competitive stuff will. Yeah. And so like, you've got that anger, you've got that mixed with like, they have no way of kind of like, of you knowing who they are and showing up at their house to be like, yo, why did you say that? Kind of a thing. Yeah. So they're just going with whatever they kind of feel like. And, I'm not making excuses for them by far, but I definitely just think that's definitely why they're so brave with what they say.
Well, I mean, it seems to me like we at least all agree that it is more pervasive in gaming communities and competitive gaming communities in particular than just other large social communities, online communities in general, because of those aspects. I think that we can all agree on that for sure. And we've seen a lot of this stuff in the news. I mean, just as recently as a few weeks ago, Nintendo had to issue a statement regarding sexual harassment complaints within the Smash Brothers community. And in that regard, we talked about this on the show before, many of the fans were really upset about it because Nintendo, I mean, obviously Nintendo's not wrong for condemning sexual harassment, right? All of us here condemn sexual harassment unequivocally. Like, obviously, we all are against that. But many fans were upset about Nintendo's reaction because Nintendo has always had this kind of hands-off interaction with the community, and most of the competitions have been grassroots. My question to y'all is, are companies like Nintendo to blame when it comes for toxicity that exists within their own community? And if it's not on Nintendo, then who is responsible for that? Brahman, what do you think?
I think that there is responsibility on the hands of both sides. I think it's a little bit more on the sides of the players just because I think that we should be held responsible. I think that, just as human beings and like being in a community itself, it's really up to each individual.
You shouldn't need Nintendo to make you a good person.
Yeah, right?
Should have higher standards. Yeah.
Right. That's fair.
I mean, just to say why I'm saying a little bit of both, it's like, you're creating this environment. Like, you should maybe have a little bit of input or just sort of like stand up for when things aren't going how they should or when they are, like maybe recognizing and acknowledging that, like having some sort of a voice as being this center for where these interactions are happening.
I I stand by that. I think that's a solid answer. Jake, what do you think? Are companies like Nintendo to blame for toxicity that exists within their own gaming community?
I don't know. I don't know if they're to blame, but they're blamed for not like nipping it in the bud, right? Like it's one of those
Right.
things. I think like just as somebody who's worked in marketing, like you've got
Mhm.
to. I think as if I was Nintendo's guy, right, and this isn't my
Right.
pitch or anything like that, but Nintendo, if you're listening, here you go, you can take it.
Right.
You know,
We're
they need to
making all
start.
kinds of pitches.
You got to start hosting these things, and you got to start setting the parameters, or either things like this sexual harassment at these kind of like events are going to be tied to your brand. And you don't want people to think Nintendo is synonymous with toxic gaming communities. Nintendo's
Right.
actually been pretty synonymous with us with nostalgia, with fun games like Mario, with iconic little even side characters like Yoshi or Kirby's, or like there's all kinds of like
Not
fun
sexual harassment within the Smash Bros.
Yes,
community. Like that's not what you want to think of when it comes to Nintendo.
Exactly. And so it's one of those where like while they may not be held responsible for it so far, I think they should be held more accountable going forward now that they've heard about it, now that they've seen it, now that they've kind of like started to even address it in a way. It's like, okay, well then you need to start hosting these things. That way you can start to hold the standard that your brand wants to set. And so that's kind of like my 2 cents on it. And
That's solid. Yeah. I think I've seen that plenty of times within the Pokemon community. I've mentioned it at the Pokemon community, and the Pokemon community is not immune to sexual harassment claims, just like the Smash Bros. Community was. Even at one point in time, I know of one VGC player that had basically a terrorist threat put against him. Now it was only a threat, and it never went to come to fruition, but like it did absolutely terrify that player. And that's not to say that the whole community is like that. Absolutely not. But and now the difference there, though, Jake, is that those competitions were run by Nintendo. So even in those situations, I mean, you still have that. You still have there will always be some level of toxicity, because in any given situation, it's kind of like Murphy's Law, in my opinion. And I think that's that's not the best outlook to look at it. You want to try to be able to fix it, but even when Nintendo has had the reins, they've still had problems with that. So,
still drop the ball even whenever they've ran it, and so
Exactly.
it doesn't give a good outlook, but it's like, put some more resources behind it and just get it right. I don't, these are multi-million dollar corporations. They can do it,
Yeah, exactly. Another question for you guys. Is the toxicity of video game communities different than toxic fandoms or con culture? Like when you talk about the video game community, we've talked a lot about that in the past and being in online chats and stuff like that. But do you think that there's any differential between that and, say, toxic fandoms? For one example that I can think of, Rick and Morty. I love Rick and Morty, but we also know that there are tons of toxic Rick and Morty fans. Like that's an undeniable thing, in my opinion. Do you think that's any different than the video game communities? And if yes, how so? Jake, Brahman, you go. Brahman.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I need to point one direction, right? Well, you guys are all this side of it.
Your brother over there. So I think that they are definitely both toxic, and there's definitely an issue that exists within them. But I think the difference is, to me, that stand out are you have a choice of whether or not to engage in, let's say, like a fandom or con culture. But when it comes to an online game, if you're playing a game online, you really don't have that choice. Like, you're in the middle of it. I mean, you have the choice. Like, what I would do is, I'm not going to put my headset on because I don't want to listen to someone really graphically saying what they're going to do to me, because that does not make me happy. So I think that's the differences that I can pick up on.
That's fair. Jake?
Yeah. No, like I definitely think there is a lot of toxicity and it's very similar. Like, I mean, even in movies, you see Star Wars fans made some girl quit acting, I think, because like she got so bullied for just playing a role. And so it's one of those where, like, actors and actresses have been bullied into quitting roles over fandoms, and so both of them are all fandoms, I think, can result in some pretty nasty kind of, like, toxic traits, if you will. And so, but like Bronwyn said, I think the gaming community is unique in a way, because, like, even if you do remove yourself from the chat, you remove your headset, anything like that, you're missing out on some pretty pivotal stuff. Like, sometimes it could be, like, there's things like, just team building and just team talk in general that, like, can really help in certain games.
Dudes over here, that guy's over there.
And so, and in some stuff that if you sound like a straight white male in the chat, like, that you don't get that bullshit. And so it's kind of like, it's sad that, different people, just based off of how you sound, get a different gaming experience altogether. And so that's one of the things that, like, I do have to kind of, like, almost, like, lean towards, like, gaming being unique in that aspect, because, like, where a movie fandom can make someone quit a job, that's unique too, right? Gaming is something you're almost forced to sit through,
Yeah, if you want to enjoy the game, if you want to participate in the game at all. And I mean, yeah. So I agree. There's a major difference, at least between how they affect you, and I think that's a big point to make. But can you still enjoy a game if it has a toxic community? Bronwyn?
So I think that, I think to an extent you can, but when it gets to the point where you can't even be involved in the game because of that reason, I'm going to touch on this a little bit more when we get into the community, like, specific communities. But for me, like with Grand Theft Auto, I really like that game, but I like the single player version of that game. I don't like the online player version of that game. So when you can separate those two things, maybe you can still get something out of it. But I think that to a certain point, if all you're feeling is attacked while you're playing something, it can ruin it for you, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you there. I mean, to me, like you had to be like, for the GTA example, that is a game that at least you have a one-player mode that you can play, and you don't have the option for an online, but you may not have that option for the next game that comes along that you really do enjoy. It could be a game that's all online. It could be something like Fortnite where it's only online multiplayer or something like that. Whatever that situation may be, whatever your niche is, whatever it is you like, that can at least take out an entire experience for you, or possibly soil the whole game. Jake, what do you think?
I was gonna just say, like, it's weird instances. Like, there are games, like, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Madden later and how toxic that community can be. But there is things where, like, Madden has a career mode, or even whenever you're just playing couch co-op with a friend, like, versus each other, where it's less toxic of a situation, and you can still really enjoy it. Now, there are games where you're forced online, like you were saying, like a Fortnite or something like that. But even them, they've come out with, like, the Save the World mode, which was kind of the first mode that was going to come out, and I think you can kind of play it by yourself. But I do believe there's some kind of online aspects. But whatever, I don't want to give it a pitch. But it's just like, there are you kind of have to make sacrifices to still enjoy some of the games, even if you don't want to enjoy them online, right? Either you're stuck with just the story mode, or you're stuck with just a campaign, or something like this. And so I think there is a little bit of a trade-off, but you can enjoy some games that still have toxic communities, just in a different way.
Yeah, you just gotta find a new avenue to enjoy it, I guess. Is the kind of main takeaway there. Interesting question though. Does that same thing apply to fandoms? Can you still enjoy a TV show if it has a toxic fandom, a movie universe, cinematic universe? Like, some of those have toxic fandoms. Are you still? Is that one? I feel like that does make a big out of different of a situation. Brahman, what do you think?
Well, I still really enjoy Rick and Morty, so maybe that makes my point for me. I think it's almost like when it's like, God, like, why do you have to ruin it for the rest of us sort of mentality?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
but if a community is so toxic, then it gets to the point where like maybe you want to share this really cool fandom or like this show that you like with your friend, and the moment you bring it up, they just like automatically have this like distaste for it. So it does, I think, impact. I don't think that means that you don't have to enjoy it though, just because a group of fans have made a bad name for something.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Jake, what about you? Toxic fandoms, still can enjoy them?
Yeah, I think, just the Rick and Morty example by itself kind of answers that question. Like, you can still like enjoy it, especially shows that have toxic fandoms. RuPaul, like, is one that, somebody sounded off in the chat about, like, it has its own kind of toxic fandom there, but like, it's still a great show that's a lot of fun to watch. A lot of shows have toxic fandoms. And I think it goes with what we said, like earlier, or what I said earlier about how the more people you get in it, the more chances you take on it having a toxic fandom. And so there's anything that's popular risks a chance of get toxic fandom, at least some toxic fans, right? Not necessarily a toxic fandom overall. I don't even think Rick and Morty really has a completely toxic fandom. I think it has some toxic fans. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah.
And so,
but it is like memeably like
oh yeah.
Well, as far as like, have you ever heard of Rick and Morty? It's so deep, like you would get it.
Dude, they're just not smart enough. They don't. They're just not smart enough to get it.
Don't get it.
Exactly. Point proven. All right. On the other end, but in all seriousness, what can be done to get rid of toxicity? That's a Pokemon. Toxicity. There we go. Toxicity in the gaming community. How can we detox? How do we detox the gaming community? Bronwyn.
Take it away.
Jake. Bronwyn. Which one? Jake. That's what I want to go with.
So speaking of RuPaul, like, no, dude, you missed a great transition. You should have went. Speaking of RuPaul, Detox, the gaming community. Detox is a very famous RuPaul's Drag Race queen. Anyway,
that was a transition.
And so, but yeah, no, detoxing certain communities. I honestly think that comes up to not like, I gave the whole spiel earlier about Nintendo needing to take a larger role, but like also good fans have to step up too. You have to report bad behavior. You have to help mods. That's a big thing, that like people need to, see something, say something kind of mentality. I'm sorry, but like, it's one of those where like, you got to root out some of these kind of like more toxic fans and call them out, call them out for their bad behavior. And, say like, whenever the Pickle Rick kid was standing on top of that, yelling at those McDonald's workers that are just there doing their job, bro, for like hardly anything, right? And like, he's yelling, I'm Pickle Rick, where's the Szechuan sauce, like rolling around and shit. Somebody should have slapped the fuck out of that dude and been like, hey, man, like, like we're just here to try to get some sauce that McDonald's is doing for funsies. Like, chill out. Like, you're making us all look like assholes. And so, it takes a little bit of everybody. It takes a village to raise a child.
You got to chip in,
Yeah, it takes a little bit of everybody. It takes us. It takes the corporations. But I think togetherness is how you detox a community.
Togetherness is how we detox. I like that. What do you think, Brahman?
Oh yeah, to build on that, like in addition to like calling out the people who like aren't representing well, another thing you can do is to be there for people who like are doing a good job. Or like, let's say you hear a girl on chat and you can like, me as a girl can be like, hey, like come over here, like let's play this game together, like maybe building a community within that, or like being there to support them because they're probably only being heard, like told things to tear them down. Or just, I know there's a lot of just like finding friends within games and creating like mini support networks within like a larger community. I think that's a way to kind of fight against this and maybe create a reputation amongst good gamer, or like good, I want to say good players, but like supportive players. Yeah.
I think that helps a lot. One of the things that I noticed when I was researching for this deep dive was and researching for the top Zen, which we'll talk about a little bit later, was we're looking at different communities. We're looking at toxic communities. We're looking at communities that weren't toxic, wholesome communities, right? And the one of them that came up that was frequently on both lists is one that I noticed the most, which was Rocket League. And so I looked at why Rocket League was on both, and it's really interesting to see what it was. And this is mostly based on theory here. Now, I don't have this from any paper or any source. I haven't done any much more search other than, 30-minute Google session, between a couple of different resources. But it seems to me that most of the complaints about the Rocket League came from very early on in the beginning of the game. Mm-hmm. And then most of the ones about the community being supportive have come a lot later on in the game. And so I looked at why mid-transition, why that there was a big shift from a really toxic community to a really supportive community. And it was because they changed the way that they reported people, the way that they grouped people based on behavior, and they just started inflicting or basically putting a lot more structure into their behavioral policies, and it worked. And it shows that if you can do stuff to actively engage in the community, you just have to take the effort to actually put those parameters on there, have a good reporting system, use that reporting system, not just have it there just to make people happy. Yeah. And that can change something from something that was be rated as the most toxic to something that's rated as the most beneficial.
Build the community you want to see.